Fucking hell. Oliveira, Jesus. What's up? Welcome to the Go Grab That Day podcast. Another beautiful day here in fucking Auckland. So we're going to talk about some fights as usual. This week is the Anthony Smith and Devin Clark fight night. I'll talk a little bit about the boxing, which I don't normally do, but because the UFC is so quiet this week and MMA in general, I'll talk a little bit about the boxing. I'm super casual when it comes to the sweet science, but it's hard not to talk about the big fight happened this week. I hope everyone is well. Hope you're all staying clean, washing your hands, blocking your mouths, all that shit. Thanks for tuning in and checking out the podcast all the time, and keep doing it, please. As I said, more content coming, plenty of videos to go up this week. Keep liking and sharing and all that kind of thing. Anyway, so I'm going to get into these fights straight away. I started off with the UFC fight night. Obviously it was supposed to be Curtis Blades versus Derek Lewis, but that fight got pulled and they're looking at doing it again some other time. They haven't said as of yet when they're going to do it, but that one was pulled. And then Anthony Smith and Devin Clark got pushed up to the main event. Card itself, not name-wise, not super exciting. The fights were pretty good, but obviously if you're not a big fan of the sport or the UFC, then a lot of these names would easily, get ignored. But the actual card itself, from the prelims to the main event, there's a lot of finishes, some really good fights there. So if you missed out, you should definitely go back and check it out. Some really good fights on that card. So I'm just going to run through it pretty quickly, because like I said, although the fights were pretty good, it's not the most exciting of cards, and it's not going to shake up too many of the divisions much as of yet anyway. There's a lot of kind of prospects there, but a bit too early to say much about them. But anyway, starting from the top, in the prelims, the biggest name on the prelims, you had Gina Mazanya versus Rachel Ostovich. That was it, but there was some good fights there. Like, there was, most fights were finished, which was good. There was a submission, TKO submission on the four cards of the prelims. But the only talking point here really for me, because I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about a lot of these unknown guys. Rachel Ostovich was obviously kind of in the same bracket as like a Paige Van Zandt. Other than her looks, she may not have been kept around in the UFC, or she may not be kept around the UFC much longer. I believe she's lost, that's 2 or 3 in a row, I think. She gives a good account for herself, but very inconsistent. She's a talented fighter outside of her looks, but very inconsistent. Doesn't seem to hit a streak at all, as the same with Paige Van Zandt. Makes you wonder as well, because the UFC obviously let Paige Van Zandt go recently. She's gone to bare knuckle boxing. So how much patience are they going to show with Rachel Ostovich as well? And that's not to be an asshole saying, she's been kept around for her looks, but let's be honest, she may have been let go a lot sooner if it wasn't for that. Or at least, I don't know. That's just my opinion. Love it or leave it. She performed okay in that fight before she got finished. It was just she's kind of in a little bit of trouble now. You got to wonder. I just hope she fucking stays away from bare knuckle boxing and go to Bellator or something like that if she does get let go. But I haven't heard anything. Dana White hasn't said anything about letting her go or anything like that. Just give her a little bit of time maybe. But the pressure is definitely on. So that was the prelims. Not a whole lot to talk about there. Like I said, there's some good fights, but I just don't want to. There's a few I want to pick out for myself in particular, so I'm not going to spend too long on these kind of unknowns. Not to insult them, but So moving on to the main card, this fight was really good. You had Jonathan Pierce versus Kai Kamaka. Very back and forth fight. Huge pace to it, even on the ground. It was such a high pace. Considering like it finished in the second round, but the pace to it was insane. Both guys very well rounded, really good striking. And some of the exchanges like on the ground, the fighting for positions over and back was really, really good. Jonathan Pierce with a really good win. So yeah, kind of some names to keep an eye out for. Jonathan Pierce could be both actually. Could be a fucking problem for people in the featherweight division. Gave a really good account for themselves. Even Kai Kamaka, who obviously lost the fight, but gave a really good account for himself. And that was another, as I said, another finish. I think overall, I suppose there was 3 decisions on the main card, but those 3 were good fights. Still very good fights. So anyway, the next one, which is definitely one of the people I wanted to mention, this was Ashley Evans-Smith versus Norma Dumont. Don't know a whole lot about Norma Dumont. Ashley Evans-Smith has obviously been around quite a while, but the one I wanted to mention was Dumont, because she was super good in this fight. Ashley Evans-Smith came into it a little later in the fight, kind of made more of a fight of it, but Dumont looked super well rounded, very powerful in her strikes. Threw everything with bad intentions. There was no feeler punches, no light jabs to gauge her distance. Everything was thrown with power, and again, another really well-rounded fighter. Looked good everywhere she went, and she is going to be a problem for people. If that fight is anything to go by, she's going to be a problem for other women in that division. Just in particular her striking, really heavy-handed. Looked to have good cardio. Kind of, I want to say she got tired, but like as I say, she throws everything with power. There's no feeler punches, so it's going to empty out your gas tank a lot quicker. But she's someone I wanted to mention. She was very good, really entertaining fight. Just in particular at the start, picking Ashley Evans-Smith apart. Took Smith a little while to get into the fight. When she did, made it a bit of a better fight. But no, rightly so, Dumont won the decision. There might have been some hint of Ashley Evans-Smith maybe being injured going into the fight. Didn't see that, but she just seemed, I don't know, what do you want to say? She was just reluctant to strike, kind of, especially at the start. She got into it as the fight went on, but kind of too little too late by then. But no, again, really good fight. And Norma Dumont, I think she's going to be one to keep an eye out for. She may shake up that division a little bit, as I said, if this fight is anything to go by. I think she came through on the Dana White's Contender Series as well. I could be wrong, but I think she did. But she's one of the names I wanted to mention. Next fight was men's featherweight, and this went decision as well. Really good fight too, though. Spike Carlisle versus Bill Algeo. Bill Algeo in his last fight, I think he beat Ricardo Lamas, and that was his debut, as far as I know, on short notice. And that's a big win, a big feather in your cap to beat Ricardo the Bully. Considering it's your debut. I could be wrong, but I think he might have come in from the Contender Series as well. And then you have, it was him versus Spike Carlisle. Bill Algeo won by decision, but again, good back and forth fight. Only thing about Spike Carlisle, his last fight was against Billy Quarantillo. And Carlisle is he's a well chiseled guy for featherweight division, but he gets super tired. And a bit like I was saying with Norma Dumont, he throws a lot of things with power. And for the first round, 2 rounds, he's very fun to watch. Very fun, but he gets tired. And he was breathing out of his ass in between rounds in this fight as well. So that's something he probably really has to work on. Because I think Paul Felder alluded to it in the fights. He said, if you want to be someone who's going to win a title, or you want to be up there challenging, you got to be able to go 5 rounds. And if you can't go 3 rounds, then you're in fucking trouble. Paul Felder said it not in so many words, but he said it some way like that, which is true. But to be honest, both Spike Carlisle is a fun guy to watch. I've watched his last 2 fights now, and He's fun to watch. He's energetic for the first round or two, but just gasses out. For me, Bill Algeo was kind of on top anyway before he got tired, but yeah, it's just when you go up against the bigger guys, the bigger names in that division, especially, featherweight is pretty stacked now as well. Your cardio is going to have to be on point, and the lighter weight classes, the guys just move constantly. It's such a high pace as well, so that's something that he's got to think about. But a good fighter. Like, outside of that, he is good. He's quite well rounded. Got a strong wrestling game. And Bill Algeo, again, another guy who's striking is fun to watch. He's quite a fun character in the cage as well. He'll talk to you. He'll gesture towards you. He likes to do the thing where, if a fighter misses a strike, he'll look over his shoulder. That kind of thing. Whether you love that or not. But a fun guy to watch. Good striker, good well-rounded. He's got some nasty knees. He done it against... I saw him do it twice in this fight. And he done it against Ricardo Lamas. Nearly knocked Lamas out. And he nearly finished Carlisle with this as well. He times the knee when they're coming in for a takedown. And he seems to time that very well. He's done it, like I said, 2 times in this fight. And he done it against Ricardo the Bully as well. So very good. I believe he called out Gigi Chikadze yesterday. I think he was helping Spike Carlisle train for this fight or something like that, and I don't know if they have an issue with that or they had a bit of back and forth before, but that would be a fun fight. 2 good strikers. But Bill Algeo, both guys are worth keeping an eye on. But like I said, Spike Carlisle's got to fucking work on his cardio definitely, and his conditioning. That was a fun fight. That was really good to watch too. Bill Algeo, for me, is, like I said, both fun to watch, but he is one to keep an eye on. He's gonna pose a threat for quite a few guys. The Chikadze fight will say a lot about him as to whether he can step up to them higher levels in that division. And it is a stacked fucking division, so he's gonna have to pose a threat in some way if he wants to climb the ranks. Moving on. This is the heavyweights. This was a fun fight. Josh Perisic versus Parker Porter. Both guys who don't know a lot about Parker Porter, but going by his interviews and stuff, he's been trying to get into the UFC for a long time. I think he said like 11 years now. Obviously at heavyweight, you can afford to be a little bit older. But Josh Perisic, I know he was on, I can't remember what season, but he was on The Ultimate Fighter. I cannot remember what season he was on, but he was on that, and he appeared on Dana White's Contender Series, I think maybe twice. But so he's had a long road to get to the UFC as well. But the good thing about the heavyweights is I know Dana White is looking to get some more heavyweights. He wants to fill that division a bit more, especially younger guys, because it is, it is usually an older division. But this fight was really good. Parker Porter, like, for a guy, neither guy looked in super shape, but of course they're heavyweights, but they had a lot of belly fat and shit like that, which, some guys don't. Some guys, they carry that and they still look great, but Porter's cardio was really good for a heavyweight, and the pace of this fight was very high. Now Josh Perisic, he was breathing out of his ass kind of towards the end, or midway through the second round, I believe it kind of started, but still didn't stop. Like, you can hear, especially when there's no you have no audience, so you can hear the heavy breathing, pretty easy. But but just didn't stop. He showed great heart in the fight because he was taking a lot of shots, but kept coming back, didn't give up right up to the last bell. Showed a ton of heart. Porter won the fight, in my opinion. He won it in probably all 3, maybe 2 rounds to 1 anyway, but pretty clear. His output was more. I think the numbers for this fight in significant strikes were very big for a heavyweight fight. I think Paul Felder said that afterwards. The numbers were super high, which is good. Both guys, consider, like I said, they're both been fighting into the UFC for a while. They've given a great account of themselves. Parker Porter's cardio in particular, and both of their striking look really good. Josh Perisic, for a big guy, he loves to throw spinny shit. back spinning elbows or back spinning fist, or he tried it maybe a few times too many in this fight, but he was really close to catching Porter a couple of times, and did catch him, or just was a little too far on the end of the punch, or a little too soon. He's kind of catching with the forearm, but it was a fun fight. It's a Parisian in particular, like, he lost the fight. It was a decision to Porter, but he just showed great heart, because he was, by midway through that fight, he was breathing out of his ass and did not give up. Even when you're thinking, oh, here we go, he's going to get finished, you just come back with a big shot and push Porter back again, or try some of his spinny shit. And yeah, like I said, really good fight. Credit to both of them. They showed some good cardio on Porter's side and great heart on Parisian's side. So I'm sure Dana White will be happy with both of them. Be interesting to see who either of those guys get next. Now, whether they're going to climb their way up through that division, I don't know. With the heavyweights, it's so fucking hard to tell, because one punch half connecting can put your lights out. But that was a really fun one. Of my favourite fights on the card to watch was that one. Just right up to the final bell, the two of them didn't stop. It's great to see, especially when they're heavyweights. But moving on to what was the co-main, was Miguel Beza versus Takashi Sato. Fun fight as well. Again, really high paced, very well rounded fighters. Miguel Beza is the guy who, I think in his last fight, he knocked out Matt Brown, the fucking asshole. It was a good performance, and he managed. He knocked out the legend that is Matt Brown. But and Takashi Sato is a real fun guy to watch, because he's got a real kind of taekwondo karate sort of stance and throws some fun strikes. But other than that, not a whole lot to say. This card is full of a lot of guys who are kind of trying to climb the ranks, or trying to get up there. But Miguel Beza won that fight via submission in round 2. There was a lot of over and back kind of. The fight was pretty over and back until it went to the ground. Good win for Beza. But two fun guys as well to keep an eye on, and they're both in the welterweight division at 170. So there's not a whole lot to talk about there, unfortunately. So moving on to what is now our main event. It's mad. And this was Anthony Smith's 6th or 7th headliner fight in a row, I think. So basically, he's been in the main event in his last 6 or 7 fights. It's fucking crazy. But he's been on a bit of a downward slide in his last few fights. Considering he was tearing through the ranks at one point, but just after the John Jones fight, he seemed to kind of slide a little bit. Not that bad. He still got a win. Since the Jones fight, he got a win against Alexander Gustafsson. Finished him. So, but I think he needed a win badly, and obviously he got it in this one with a submission in round 1 over Devin Clark, who was not an easy fight. But I was glad to see Smith get a win, because he needed it. I think he needed it. He was under pressure. Just not looking as good in his last few fights, but he said coming into this one he was going to go back to himself, more exciting, looking to finish fights. And hey, look, Devin Clark had him on his heels for as long as the fight lasted, but he had him on it, kind of backing up for the first 10 seconds. But Smith got the takedown, and then he just looked dominant from there, and he got a good triangle choke. So it was a good finish. I like when Smith came out and said, he's been interviewed afterwards, and he said that he's not going to talk about who he needs to fight to get to the title. He said he's just going to, whoever the UFC give him, he'll take that and slowly get his way back towards the title, which is good to hear. I think that's what he needs to do, is build the confidence again. By no means is he done, but just I think he needs to take his time before he goes rushing back in against big fighters. It can be a confidence thing. You see a lot of the time, these fighters, they fight, whoever the best in the division may be, whether it's Jose Aldo at his time, back in John Jones, Stipe, whoever, these guys who were kind of the title holders or the best in the division, you see these guys, they fight them and they lose, maybe a close decision, and a lot of the time what can happen is they get the rub, they having fought the best in the division, they kind of become, then they get a bit of that, I don't know what you call it, they gain from that loss. They become better, and they start to kind of become the second guy in the division, or they just start to become a much better fighter. Or it can go the other way. where they just fight the best and they give it their all, and then after that it's just hard for them to give that same level against the lower ranked guys. I don't know if that's the reason for it, but you just see it happening. And I think that was kind of the case with Smith, just after giving his all against John Jones and coming up short. John Jones was winning that fight well, but Smith still gave a good account of himself and went to 5 rounds. I suppose then it's got to be hard to just kind of find that same, do or die kind of attitude against other guys. You see that happening sometimes. Or, like I said, you can see it going the other way where they get the rub and all of a sudden they become monsters and just beat everyone else below the champion. It's kind of happened with Smith. It looks to have maybe happened with Dominic Reyes, but I don't know. He just didn't look as good in his last fight, and that of course was after he fought Jones as well. So I'd imagine it happens. You go up, you fight, especially someone like John Jones, who's arguably the GOAT, arguably one of the best anyway. And I'm sure you gotta. How hard it must be to find everything in you to try and beat that guy, and then you come super close. Ray is more so than Smith, and still come up short. It's got to be hard to find that same, to dig that deep again against lower ranked guys, or maybe overconfidence or whatever it may be. But you do see that happening sometimes. But it's good to see Smith back. Who will fight next? I don't know. There's quite a few names in that division he could fight, but I think he's right. Take your time, slowly build your way back up the title, build the confidence. There's enough names there ahead of you to, ahead and behind to pick if you want. But good result. I was glad to see him win. And Devin Clark, he's still reasonably young. I know he'd had something had happened with his family. I think his mother-in-law or something had passed away during the week or something, so I'm sure that played on his mind. It couldn't have been fucking easy stepping in there after that. But credit to him, he did test Smith for as long as the fight lasted. He hit him early, and Smith being the vet, the more vet of the two, more experienced, he used that and he got the submission in the end. But that's that. That is the end of that card. Like I said, not a whole lot of talking points. Even on some of the bigger names on that card, they're not exactly ones that are going to shape up the division too much just yet. Well, fun card. It's one of those cards. If sometimes you don't pay attention to them and then you watch them, they're brilliant. Like, all the fights were really good. Sometimes guys want to elevate their game, and the name of the card is not. Maybe it's not selling, but it tends to happen a lot in the UFC. Yeah. So moving on to next week's card. The main event has been changed a bit, and that one was actually quite weird because Kevin Smith, who's been making big strides in the UFC since he got off the Contender Series, calling out Izzy and things like that, a fun fighter to watch. He was due to fight Jack Hermanson. I believe he was due to fight Jack Hermanson next week. I think he's after testing positive for COVID. Fucking COVID. And that fight has been, they were going to pull it, but what they've done is they've pulled Kevin Holland and put him against Jacare Souza, which is going to be at UFC 256. So Holland is going to fight Souza and Jack Hermanson is going to fight Vettori. So they've basically changed opponents. So rather than Jack Hermanson fighting Kevin Holland and Souza fighting Vettori, they've swapped. Kevin Holland fights Souza and Vettori fights Hermanson. But it doesn't really. I would like to have seen Kevin Holland fighting Hermanson, but that's not a bad fight. Vettori and Hermanson still, it's still a contender fight. Not exactly a title contender, but they're there or thereabouts. That is a fun fight. Hermanson and Vettori is a very fun fight, I think, and also is Holland and Souza. Both fights, I'd say a lot about each fighter. Obviously, Jacare Souza is a guy who's been around a long time, but you beat him. It kind of says a lot about you, and that is probably the toughest fight for Kevin Holland so far. Yeah, definitely the toughest fight for him so far. So we'll see if he can back up all his talking he's been doing. Same with Jack Hermanson and Marvin Vittori, who've been making big strides in that division. Two exciting fighters. So yeah, and I'll just run through the entire card very quickly. Again, it's a little similar to this week. Not the most exciting, but it's a little better in my opinion. Like obviously in December you're gonna have a lot of big fights coming up, a lot of big cards, so they're a bit quiet this week and next week. But in the prelims for next week, you've got Luis Smolka is fighting Jose Quinones. To take a deep breath before that one. And you've got who else? Jordan Levitt fighting Matt Wyman. Fucking hell, Matt Wyman, been around a long time. Pretty exciting fight too. Then you have John Vellante versus Jay Collier at heavyweight. That'd be a good fight too. I like John Vellante, he's quite entertaining when he fights too. He's one of Matt Serra's boys. And then on to the main card. Yeah, it's not super exciting. Yeah, Montana De La Rosa versus Santos. In the co-main you've got OSP, Oven St. Preux versus Jamal Hill. That's a good fight. And of course Jack Hermanson versus Vittori in the middleweight main event. So yeah, it's not a bad card, but not super exciting either. But yeah, like I said, the UFC do that. They're going to build up to all the big fights in December, which there is some pretty exciting fights in December. Top of the bill for me out of all of those is probably you've got Tony Ferguson against Charles Oliveira. Isn't it Charles? Oliveira, anyway. I always mix the two Oliveira guys up, but he's the one. It's Drew Bronx Oliveira. Yeah, so you got Tony Ferguson versus him, which is going to be a fucking great fight. Hard to call a winner in that one, but got some exciting ones coming up. I won't run through all of the December cards right now, but I will talk about them when they're a little bit closer. So anyway, that's next week's card. Not overly exciting, like I said, but that co-main, or the main event, it'll be worth watching for the sake of the middleweight division. Actually, yeah, the week after, then you've got the UFC 256. I suppose I can run through very quickly. No, I don't need to. But yeah, that's so quiet one next week, and then you've got the big card after that. That's pretty much all that's happening in terms of fights in the MMA world right now. There was one other thing before I get on to the boxing. Yeah, strange one was after in the press conference yesterday, the post-fight press conference, Dana White was asked a question about Yair Rodriguez. Rodriguez was a featherweight, not featherweight and lightweight if you want to be, but mostly featherweight. He was asked about him when his next fight was, and it was a strange answer. He kind of turned to one of his associates who you couldn't see, off camera, and he had asked about, have we not made that public yet? And he was kind of shaking his head, and he said, Yair Rodriguez will not be fighting for a while. And they had asked, the reporters had asked, why, they had tried to kind of dig at him a little bit. If he didn't give us anything, is he injured? And Dana White said, no, he's not injured. He said, it's just something we haven't made public. And then they asked him had he refused to fight. Dana said, no, I would be able to talk about that. So something going on with Rodriguez behind closed doors. Well, it may not be anything big at all, but it was weird the way Dana White went on about it. And he said it wasn't an injury. He said he hasn't turned down a fight. So I don't know. You'd imagine if it was a contractual thing, Dana White would have probably said it, because he likes to do that to put pressure on fighters. Yeah, so strange. Don't know what's going on there, but doesn't sound good. With Rodriguez, I do think I've heard in the past he's quite a difficult guy to deal with in terms of getting him to sign fights and things like that. Now, I don't know is that what's going on, but Dana White would usually say those things because it puts the pressure on the fighters then. But yeah, I just found that a bit strange. I haven't found anything up to today. I haven't found anything in regards of any more than that. But strange one, very strange one. But yeah, hopefully it's nothing too serious, or hopefully we'll find out soon. Yeah, so that's all my UFC discussion for now. I'm going to talk a little bit about the boxing. And before I get into this, with regards to MMA, I'm a big fan. I could talk about it all day. With boxing, I'm at best casual. But obviously, as a fight fan, I'm going to know who Tyson and all these other big names are. But I just wanted to discuss a little bit about the fights that happened yesterday. With regards, I know Joyce was fighting and Badu Jack. I don't know these guys, so I'm not going to talk about them. But I know they're big-ish names in regards boxing. But obviously I want to get on to the fucking Tyson and Roy Jones fight. I don't know what I say in my last podcast, where I was just venting on social media, but I thought it was bullshit. And not about the fight. Obviously I was intrigued, as anyone would be. But then when they brought in all these rules about you can't cut your opponent, you're not going to be allowed to knock them out and whatever, and there'll be no judges, which I think they weren't long back, kind of contradicting themselves on that. They weren't long going back when they lost a lot of viewings, I'd say. Even though I'd say viewership wise, they probably lost a lot anyway because of the bullshit with the rules. But the fight itself was a lot of fun. To be honest, it was quite cool to watch. There was something fun about it, watching Tyson fight again, and obviously Jones Jr. as well. Both looked good for their age. Tyson in particular surprised me, and he surprised a lot of people because he was the fitter of the two. Now at the same time, he was probably the fitter as well because he moved less. A little less, though. He's still, a lot of head movement, but obviously Roy Jones does a lot of, bigger movements, uses his feet a lot more, and they did allude to how Roy Jones' knee is quite bad now. And to be honest, when he was walking out, it didn't look comfortable as he walked out. It just looked like a guy whose legs are gone, to be honest. And you noticed that in the fight with the two of them. The legs just aren't there. They gave a really good account. It was a fun fight to watch. Tyson didn't by any means look like he was going easy, and neither did Jones. The two of them were, they were going for it. I think the best thing about it was that neither of them got hurt. I don't think anyone I know people obviously want to see Tyson ramp it up and stuff like that, which he did for some of the fight, but thankfully Jones' movement didn't allow him to get his head taken off. But like the body shots from Tyson were pretty heavy. But like I said, thankfully neither of them were hurt. You don't want to see that. To be honest, I don't really want to see older guys fighting too often anyway. I had hoped this was kind of a once-off. Hoped they'd made a lot of money out of it and that was it. But Tyson's both of them are kind of talking like they may do it again. I've ranted enough on that kind of thing, so I'm going to try not rant too much here again. Yeah, but look, fun. It was fun to watch. It was I truly enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it more because neither guy got badly hurt, or neither of them looked terrible. Being honest, and a lot of people's predictions, including my own, were saying, Tyson would either have to try and get him out of there early, or else he was going to get super tired. That didn't happen. Like I said, he looked the fitter of the two, and he had in his corner Rafael Lovato, Rafael Cordero from King's MMA, who was a really good MMA coach, a fun guy to listen to, but it's cool to see him in the corner. A shout out to him as well. But he's coached a lot of UFC fighters, mainly Kelvin Gastelum, but there's a big list of guys, Brazil and outside of that as well. But yeah, like I said, fun fight. I did enjoy it. I don't want to see them do it again. I know I don't. I kind of, it's not, maybe once off these kind of things are okay, but do you keep doing it until somebody gets hurt? Because let's be honest, had Tyson caught Jones with one of his heavy hooks, do you really want to see him get knocked out? And the same with Tyson, do you want to see Tyson get knocked out? Jones at points were throwing really stiff right hands and jabs. I mean, do you really want to wait until one of these guys gets knocked out bad? Look, I understand them doing it. It's obviously it's for them, but at the same time, there comes a point, it's like my argument with the MMA and the UFC, but there comes a point where they got to just step aside. I know from what I hear from people who know a lot more about boxing than me, boxing is not doing super well. You know, there's a lot of the names. That's the problem with boxing. It's all about fucking contracts and, you know, brown envelopes being passed under tables. There's too much of that shit and the politics, and that's one of the reasons why I don't like boxing. But yeah, I know like people are saying that maybe it's a little bit in trouble. I don't think it's in trouble, but you know, it's terms of I think the UFC is doing a lot better now than it ever has been when you're talking MMA versus boxing. But anyway, the point I'm making is, you know, maybe this is why they do these things, is to keep the name, you know, or to help build it or something like that. I don't know, but I think some of these legends, they gotta just get out of their own way and get out of the way of the guys that are trying to climb up, because you're never going to see new fighters come in if they keep doing that. And it's the same for MMA. You know, counts are the same. If the legends stick around too long, then you're never going to see these new guys step up, or else you're going to have to watch these fucking legends get knocked out or get hurt, and no one wants to see that. Like I was saying, it's fun to watch. I just don't want to see it happen too often. I think, you know, just let them retire. I've ranted so much about this lately, I'm sick of hearing myself even say it, but it was fun. I did enjoy watching the two of them box. And I know, obviously afterwards they both said they might do it again. Tyson said he kind of wants to do it again. Look, maybe you do it with these, like if you're going to do it like they did yesterday, maybe with certain rules, or have an exhibition league, or I know they're looking at this Legends League. Yeah, it's not the worst idea, but just, I don't know, like how often do you want to watch these legends, you know, look less of themselves, or end up fighting until they get hurt? It's small margin for error there, really. I can see what they're trying to do. I know the commentators on BT Sport were saying, you know, they're trying to get this league where you could have maybe ex-footballers fight each other, baseball players, whatever it may be. They can come in and have a fight, and maybe that's a good thing to do, like what they're doing with this the YouTube fighters. You know, obviously people will watch. I think it helps to bring fans in. But does it then do more harm than good for boxing? Like, it must. Again, for me, I'm at best a casual when it comes to boxing, but it must piss a lot of fighters and fans off to see the likes of Jake Paul, or previous times his brother, I think it was his brother anyway, Logan Paul. I think he headlined a card where, I can't remember what fighter was underneath, but he was it's the English guy. I know his name is just not coming to me, but I know basically there was some better fighters that were underneath him. Obviously, you know, him having no amateur career, and all of a sudden, you know, using his money to get trained by some big names, and then they get to step in ahead of these fighters. It's got to piss some of the real, you know, boxing fans off, and I'm sure it's got to piss the boxers off too. But then do you look at it the other way and say it makes money or brings more eyes to the sport, which David Hay had said yesterday on BT Sport. So it makes sense in some ways. For me, I don't really like it, because I can understand the argument both ways, but do you really want to lose your, you know, do you really want to lose your fans that have always been there, or, you know, have them not enjoy it as much just to drag some other maybe casuals to it? Or, like David Hay said, maybe it brings more eyes on the sport that will eventually become, you know, full-time fans, which is understandable too. But I don't know. The Paul brothers, credit to them with what they're doing with the money, and I'm sure they're earning plenty of money. And I don't know much about them until they started fighting. Some of Logan Paul's videos on YouTube, they are quite funny, but they're not, like, it's annoying, because there's so many boxers out there who have been training all their lives looking for these big money fights, or looking for the fights to change their lives and change their families' lives, and these guys get to walk in because, you know, they're bored, or they have plenty of money, they want to do something different, which is good. But maybe separate it, you know. Maybe if they do this whatever they call it, Legends League, or if you want to do an exhibition league, to where you have these fight nights where you get to have, you know, guys like Tyson coming back, or you get to have these YouTube stars fighting each other, do an exhibition night. But I don't think it's fair to have them headlining cards ahead of some of these other bigger fighters. You know, guys who've been around a lot longer, who would, let's be honest, beat the absolute piss out of the two brothers at the same time, you know. That's my opinion. Jake Paul didn't look terrible in that fight yesterday. His opponent looked fucking horrendous. And again, I don't want to shit on anyone who steps in the ring or the cage or whatever it may be. Takes serious balls to do it, especially in front of that many people. So credit to him. What was his name? Nate Robinson, I think. He was an ex-basketball player. But at best, he looked like he was dragged out of bed and pushed into the ring for a fight without even giving him a breakfast, you know. It just didn't look like he wanted to be there. From the first punch he took, like when he got knocked down, he didn't look like he wanted to. He was looking for a way out. It just looked terrible. It looked fucking terrible. And I don't watch boxing that often, but I watched it yesterday saying, my God, this is bad. It was terrible. I know people are going to defend them and say, credit to, you know, Jake and Logan Paul are stepping in there, and the other guy, KSI, and all these boys, and even Nate Robinson. But if you're going to do it, give a better account of yourself. Look like you really want to be there. Nate Robinson, I don't care what anyone says, he did not look like he wanted to be there. Whatever about Jake Paul, credit to him, he won the fight, good knockout. He didn't look like he wanted to be there, and then he ended up getting knocked the fuck out, like, you know. I think it's kind of making fun of boxing a little bit. That's me being honest. And I can imagine there's got to be some of the genuine boxing fans. I have a few friends who are really big boxing fans, and one or two who I might get on to maybe argue their point with me on the podcast sometime. But like, I kind of remember a bit like CM Punk when he was in WWE, when he was in the UFC. He obviously came from WWE, but it's kind of similar, you know. This guy comes in, you know, thinking he can fight the best on a year, but he at least took a year. He took one whole, I think even longer. He took a full year. I think he trained with a big camp. I can't remember at the time, but you know, he at least did that. I know he got like 3 fights, whatever he got in the UFC before they let him go. But one thing's for sure is he was not. Mind you, I suppose he was a little bit. He was getting on some main cards and things like that, but he was never a headlining card. The UFC did not let him headline a card, which is credit to them in that sense. Yeah, I just, as I said, Jake Paul, the one that fought yesterday, Jake Paul, he looked okay. And I think, as far as I know, I don't know, his brother anyway has Shannon the Cannon Briggs, part of his entourage and kind of helping him out. So, I mean, it's a good guy to have in your corner. But it's no good if you're going to be fighting these guys. Like he said in the interview beforehand that he knows Nate Robinson doesn't have a good coach, and he knows he's going to beat him and all that, and obviously all fighters will say that, but then he literally looked like he hadn't been coached. So, you know, I think, especially for boxing fans, I don't think it's good. I think this YouTube thing where you get these fighters coming in, or you get NFL players or whatever, rugby players, soccer players, whatever you want to call it, coming in, having a fight is not a bad thing. But I think maybe it's got to be separate from the real boxers, the real, you know, you can't have these YouTube stars headlining cards ahead of, you know, some of these other bigger names or other guys who've been around doing it a long time. I think it's unfair. I know people are going to say, oh, but it brings more eyes on them and all that, but that's fair enough. But then they're one and done, you know, or else they don't have to stick around. You know, these YouTube guys are making millions. They don't have to stick around. They can fucking walk out whenever they like. But again, I see arguments for both sides, but my argument is the Legends League is not a bad idea, or doing this YouTube League or whatever you want to call it. It's not bad. It's not a bad idea. You get maybe, you know, actors or whatever that maybe want to have a fight, and they, you know, it's cool, but make some different rules or something where they have to make sure that they have to train with a good camp, or they have to go through a proper training camp, and don't have them fucking headlining against these other fighters. are headlining over these other, legit boxers. I just think it's unfair. But, I do, again, I keep repeating myself, I do see the argument for both sides. I just, make a league. If you want to call it the Legends League or the Exhibition League or the fucking dumbass from fucking YouTube League, whatever you want to call it, I don't know, but it's unfair to have them topping the bill in some of these cards ahead of other fighters. That's the main argument I would make. And actually the bigger argument I would make is, if you're going to fucking do it, you got to make sure they're going to do it, that they're going to train, they're going to come prepared. I don't care what anyone says, there's no way Nate Robinson was prepared, because he didn't look like he knew what he was doing at all. He was constantly grabbing Jake Paul, he would throw, sometimes he wouldn't even throw a punch, he was straight in, ducking his head down and grabbing him. It was like a grappling match. He didn't want to be there, had no interest. So, if Jake Paul and his brother are going to do this, then do it, but get some other guys that are going to test you at least. Don't be just fighting these guys to make you look good, which is, then again, that's boxing in some senses too. Yeah, again, credit to him for stepping in there. I'm not going to shit on him much more, but just, it's that old saying, like, you don't play boxing. And Nate Robinson got knocked out pretty bad yesterday. In my opinion, some of the analysts were kind of saying, the fight should have been stopped after the first knockdown. I don't think so. I don't think he was that bad. I just think he didn't have any interest at all. And the second one, again, I see the argument maybe it could have been stopped there. But the problem is that the final punch connected way better than the previous ones. And it proper knocked him out. So it was not good. But at the same time, was he prepared? Didn't look like he was. So maybe it's on him as well. If you're going to come in and fight, actually have a fucking fight, be prepared. Otherwise, deal with the consequences as well. But yeah, again, I'd say, that league, not the worst idea to do something like that. Might be fun to watch. Get some casuals on the eyes of boxing. But separate it. I think you got to separate it from... Or if you're going to do it, have the lower, the up-and-coming boxers on this card. And I'm not... have like the real up-and-coming guys, the young guys, maybe on the card with the YouTube stars. That brings light on them. That's a smart way to do it. But don't do it to these guys who've been around a long time. It's insulting to them. And I don't know, maybe they're okay with it. Maybe they make more money, but, will they ever truly make a name for themselves that way? I don't know. But yeah, that's a bit of my rant over. But again, like, to not totally shit on it, I did enjoy the main event, Tyson and Roy Jones, but the fucking co-main event I thought was horrible to watch. I thought it was so bad. Yeah, nothing more to say. To be honest, I didn't watch a whole lot of the rest of the card because, like I said, I'm a casual fan at best when it comes to boxing. But I had to talk about those two fights. I just think boxing needs to do something here with regards. You can't just let these YouTube stars come in and take over. Either you're going to be a gimmick or you're going to find a way for them to make the money or shine some new eyes on boxing, which they can do. But yeah, like, the other thing is that Jake Paul now calling out. I know his brother had previously called out, I think he called out Colby Covington, if I'm not wrong. And I think they both called out Conor McGregor, and then they were calling out Dylan Dennis and Ben Askren and all this shit. I'm about to rant again. Any of those names that I just said would absolutely batter the two Paul brothers. Absolutely fucking batter them. And I'd put any money on it. In boxing, if you want to talk boxing. In MMA, it's not a fight. In boxing, any of those names would batter the Paul brothers. Even look, the worst of those names, and I say the worst because of his striking, is probably Ben Askren, Dylan Dennis maybe too. But what people forget, and they don't, it's like, a good example would be Conor McGregor. People like to talk about, I even see guys there's idiots all over the internet, I know that, but you see guys that maybe they train full-time jiu-jitsu or they're wrestlers or whatever, and they talk about, Conor McGregor, let's they try and call him out for, a role or, a wrestling match or whatever. People don't understand. Or give an example, like for Ben Askren, he's not a striker, no. He doesn't strike in his fights, or he didn't before he retired. Same with Dylan Dennis, these guys. But do you not think that they train it? It's the same with McGregor. People don't know John Kavanagh's a fucking good jiu-jitsu coach. And McGregor is actually good at jiu-jitsu. He just has rarely had to use it. I mean, he put up the biggest test against Khabib when it came to takedowns, outside of maybe Ali Quinta. But people are under this impression that they don't train jiu-jitsu or wrestling, or like Ben Askren doesn't hit pads or doesn't train his striking. They train it, and they've been doing it for fucking years. And the Paul brothers now think because they've, done a bit of training for the last while, they've got the money to pay for these big camps, that they're going to step up and beat these guys. They haven't a fucking hope. Now again, maybe it's a ploy to make money, and they're calling them out with the hope that they get a fight with them, make a lot of money. Like Conor McGregor, this isn't even a joke. Conor McGregor and Dylan Dennis, Colby Covington as well, maybe, I would even go with any of them, would beat the two Paul brothers at the same time. McGregor would one punch would drop both of them. Dylan Dennis as well. These guys fight regularly against some of the best in the world in MMA, smaller gloves, and albeit they don't, let's leave McGregor out of it because he's a good striker, but let's go with, as I said, Ben Askren and Dylan Dennis, who aren't strikers. Both of them would piece up the two Paul brothers easily. If Robbie Lawler, using elbows and hammer fists and things you can't use in boxing, if he couldn't knock out Ben Askren, but the Paul brothers are going to do that, come on, it's not going to happen. The fight's probably not going to happen anyway, but it's just I do wonder, because sometimes they convince me that they really believe they can beat them. Now maybe I'm the idiot and they're really just looking for a money fight, and that's why they call them out, but they convince me that they actually believe they can do it sometimes, which is insane. And people, obviously Ben Askren had a horrendous run in the UFC, but check out his record before he got to the UFC. The man spent 5 or 6 fights without even getting punched. Now that all comes down to obviously his wrestling, but like I said, don't think that when these guys are training that they're just doing you think Conor McGregor is just hitting pads and just stand up sparring. They're not. They train every aspect of the sport all the time, have been doing it for years. But the Paul brothers think that they can come in and just they're going to knock them out. It's crazy. I'm going to try and not get too pumped up about this because I feel like an idiot then afterwards when I watch it back. But yeah, and the funny thing is they'll probably get one of those fights. They'll probably get a Dylan Dennis or a Ben Askren or something. But yeah, Dennis as well. Dylan Dennis is a high level jiu-jitsu guy, but I guarantee you he's a better striker than the two Paul brothers. Yeah, that's my piece on that idea. This is the side that pisses me off about them, with the calling them out, and you got people calling for it. I've seen it you see it on YouTube and things like that, where people actually think that they can do it. Obviously they all think that Conor McGregor would beat them, which is true, but they actually think that these guys could beat Ben Askren or beat Dylan Dennis. And even, I think Logan Paul had called out Colby Covington. Colby Covington would fucking batter the two of them easily, and he wouldn't even break a sweat. He would make bits of both of those guys on the same night, just boxing. Where they get this thing where they think they can beat these fighters who've been doing it all their fucking lives. While they were making YouTube videos, these boys were training, breaking their balls in the gym, training every aspect of the sport. It's just, it's crazy. But again, on the other side, they're making money out of it. They're doing well, so I'm not going to keep shitting on them, but I'm not a fan of the Paul brothers. I think credit to them, they've got balls for stepping in there. But are they really stepping in there against good fighters? Like I said, that they're in there, they're getting trained, or they're at least having help from Shannon and Cannon Briggs. Obviously, he's a fucking good boxer. He's an animal. But are their opponents getting the same? Or are their opponents guys with less money and looking for a payday, and they can't afford to pay these big camps, so they just, makes me wonder. Anyway, I think I've ranted enough about those fucking two wankers, but again, credit to them. Without totally shitting on it, make a YouTube league. I don't know why. I would like to see, unless they've done it already, but I don't think they have. I'd like to see if the Paul brothers get together and actually make a YouTube league or a YouTube boxing thing. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Fucking YouTube FC or YFC, fucking something, where they can have all these YouTube stars fight each other or as I said, do it alongside boxing, but you gotta separate it from the real fighters, or at least the guys who've been doing it all their lives. Not to say that these boys aren't really fighting, they are, but they haven't been doing it all their lives. They haven't had to fight to feed their families like these other boxers have. But there is something that could be made there, as I said. You know, I talked about it in the past jokingly with friends and some of my family, how it would be funny to see like an actual league where actors could go, you know, famous actors could have a fight against each other. You know, there'd be heaps of money in that to see. And some of them have talked. I know Tom Cruise, I think, had talked about fighting Justin Bieber at one point. You know, it sounds so fucking stupid, but would I watch it? Yes. So there is an avenue, there is an area for that. But just don't insult the fighters who've been doing it all their lives by putting these guys on main cards or whatever, you know. But it'd be fun. You could make a pretty cool show, you know, have them do a legit training camp under a legit team and a fight at the end of it, whether it's, you know, 6 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever. You could do that. You could make heaps of money doing that. And absolutely I would watch it. It's just when, like I said, when they're put ahead of the fighters who've been doing it all their lives, and then they want to call out these guys thinking they can all of a sudden box anyone, you know. That's where it gets stupid. But there is an area for it, and it would be fun. I would watch it. Like I watched yesterday as much as I give out about it. There is an avenue for it, but they just gotta not have it completely mixed too much, you know. Again, and if the UFC decided to do it, it would be fun. But I think do it in a sense where it's, you know, once off, maybe one night of celebrities fighting each other, or, you know, where they're legitimately trained. Things like that. Maybe change the rules slightly, I don't know, but, you know, having amateur rules or something, I don't know, but there is a place for it. Where that place is, not 100%, but it's just not mixing it with the real guys who have been doing it for so long, and it's insulting them, you know. Anyway, that's enough fucking ranting for this episode, I believe, and I've covered pretty much all I was supposed to talk about. But yeah, that's this week's UFC, so not a lot to talk about in terms of UFC, but I got a bit of ranting out in terms of boxing. So yeah, tune in next week for whatever. I've been ranting a lot lately, so we'll see what I rant about next week. But yeah, so that's all really. Please keep liking, sharing, all that kind of thing. I have a few more videos to go up this week, some other kind of segments I'm going to try and do, shorter videos. Just a matter of getting them all out, getting them edited on time. Edited. Fuck, I can't say that word. But yeah, getting them all fixed, made properly on time. So yeah, please keep liking, keep sharing. Yeah, share the channel as much as possible if you can. If you get a moment, please share it, or try and get more subscribers and things like that, so I can be able to put up more content. As I've said previously, I am really enjoying this. It's a great way for me to vent, as you can see, and not have to burn the ears off people who don't want to listen to me talk about fights. So yeah, please keep sharing, liking and all that, and any feedback or anything like that, please hit me up with it. And yeah, thanks very much. So I'll see you, well, I won't see you, but I'll talk to this camera next week. Stay safe, guys, and thanks for watching.